ladies. Thank you for calling me and making that happen. Please, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to just, I know we prayed a lot, but I would pray just a little bit more. If you don't mind, you can be seated. Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us all to be together tonight, and please help us know that we are in a tiny pocket right now of safety and peace, and the world around us is going to keep spinning, but we have something to do here tonight. And even though we may not know what the end result will be, but there's something that's going to happen tonight. And I'm just speaking for all of us, and we say thank you for letting it happen, whatever will be. And order my steps, O Lord, as always. Amen. So when you called, there were two things that entered my mind. Oh my gosh, somebody at that sweet church is sick with cancer, because that's where my mind always goes. Or the second was, my kids did something bad and someone saw it and they're calling like all around. So that was my first. And one of those children, I want to tell you really quickly, one of those children tonight is here. And when I got out of the car, she was with me on the drive here. When I got out of the car, she said, "Mom, weren't you wearing something else earlier?" And I said, "Yeah, but I changed. Actually, I tried on several outfits." And she said, "I kid you not," right before I walked in, "and that's what you ended up with?" Ba-choom. I love my children. Okay, so so I'm going to tell you my story and why I'm here. Some of you have heard it already, so thank you for being patient and letting me share it again. But tonight I'm going to expound a little bit and kind of tell you what else has happened in my life. So we used to live, you can probably tell from my deep Southern accent that I'm from Chicago. And in my mind, that was utopia. That's where we lived. It was Chicago. It was all I needed. It was perfect. And my husband and I worked in the computer industry. He was an engineer, a software engineer. Woo-hoo. And I was like a programmer analyst. I was like down here on the totem pole. So we were like wicked cool. And working in Chicago, and it was during the time of the dot-com bubble that burst up in Chicago, so there were layoffs, repeated layoffs. And we would always know, and we worked for the same company, and so we could tell that by department, the firings were happening. People were being laid off en masse. And the key was, if on Friday morning you got an email from HR and it said, "Come to the HR conference room," you knew you were doomed. So my husband sends me a text, and he's like, "Hey, listen, I got the email." I'm like, "No, I have a little house with a white picket fence, and I really need that job." So anyway, nonetheless, he goes down, he gets, does his thing, and then he sends me another text about 2 hours later, and he says, "Meet me in the coffee shop in the lobby." I'm like, okay. So I go down, and there's one of those high top tables, and he's got my little tea waiting there, and his coffee waiting here, and this like goofy look on his face. But it was a smile, and I'm like, "Oh, awesome." So I said, "You didn't get fired? Is that why you're smiling?" He's like, "Oh, no, totally fired." I was like, "Oh, why are we smiling?" And he said, "Well, I've been thinking." Now, keep in mind, it's been 2 hours. He said, "The Lord spoke to me, and he decided that I should go to the seminary in Fort Wayne, Indiana." 2 hours. I said, "You know what? I talked to Jesus this morning, and he did not mention Fort Wayne, Indiana. He wants you to get a job," is what he does. No. God wins all the time. And so while I think my life is headed this direction, we'll live forever, my children will inherit this beautiful house with a little picket fence in Chicago, God's going, "No, you're going to Fort Wayne." So we go to Fort Wayne. And when you live in Chicago, it's kind of a pocket. It's a little bubble. You think that that's the whole world, and you don't know where anything else is. So a friend of mine says, "Listen, if you're going to go to Indiana, how big can Indiana be? You should work in Indianapolis, because the American Cancer Society is hiring programmers. And that's really important to you." And I said, "Yes, it is. And let me share with you, ladies, why that's important to me." My mom's name was Roberta, and I always say that when I speak, no matter where I speak, because it's important. Name of Jesus, the name of Roberta. People need to know both. Roberta was the finest example of Jesus on earth. Living through her, I have ever known. The finest Christian person I've ever known. She was 37 when she was diagnosed with cancer, and she died when she was 42. She never stopped witnessing. Not ever. I don't mean there wasn't a lapse. I mean, I never heard her speak a bad word about anyone, and she never stopped witnessing. At the very end of her life, she was in something called hospice. It's where you go for the final time. And she was, right before she slipped into a coma, she was laying in bed completely immobile. And I was sitting by her bedside one day, and she said, a nurse came in, and she said, "Oh, nurse, could you please come over here and get me some water?" I'm like, "Mom, I'm right here, I'll get you your water." And she shot me one of those moms in church looks, you know, sit quietly. So I did. I sat very quietly. And the nurse came over and gave her water with a straw because she couldn't move from the neck down. And then as the nurse put the thing down, my mom said, "Oh, pardon me. While you're here, would you mind just reading me a passage from the Bible?" And I'm like, "Mom, I'm right here. I can read it to you in German if you want me to. I don't care." Just, again, I got the look, so I was silent. The nurse came over, and the nurse was clearly not someone who was familiar with the Bible. And my mom said, she said, "What do you want me to read?" My mom said, "Oh, I don't care. Just pick it up wherever." And the person did what almost anyone who's unfamiliar with the Bible would do. She opened it right in the middle. And the middle is the Psalms. It's all flowery and beautiful and good and lovely, isn't it? And so Mom, well, most of it. So she read to Mom, and then when she said, "Is that enough?" And my mom said, "I think it's enough." So she slams it and puts it down, marches away, and I'm like, "Okay, what's going on? I'll read to you forever if you want me to, Mama." And she said, "You know what I can do from this bed?" And I said, "No." She said, "I can do nothing." She said, "I know my doctor knows about Jesus. I know the other nurse. I know the lady that cleans the floor knows about Jesus. And I know that woman has not yet met him. And if I can do anything every day, she has to come in and give me water, and she has to read to me. And I'm going to keep working until my eyes are closed." And that's why you need to know Roberta. So that's the example that I had of Christianity. Now, who could live up to that? So anyway, we transitioned over to Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is not a military installation, for those of you who don't know. Also not like a computer programming mecca. Like nothing happens in Fort Wayne. But nonetheless, I was not going to go to the American Cancer Society and work because it was in Indianapolis, and that was close to 4 hours away. So we get there. We're plowing through. I'm able to find a job where I can work, and my husband's going to seminary learning many ancient dead languages that really don't matter a lot. So he's over there studying. No, I'm kidding. He could translate any biblical text. So when we're there, I come home one afternoon, and he's got that same look on his face, and I'm like, "Oh no," because now I know that little smile and that thing in the eyes, there's something going on. I said, "What's happening?" And he said, "Good news. There's something called a vicarage that we get to go on." I said, what does that mean? He said, "Well, we get to move our 3 little children for 10 months, relocate, learn under a pastor for a while, and then move back and finish up our education. That's what we get to do." Do we now? Okay. And where do we get to move our 3 little children and rip them out of school and things like that? And he said, Joliet, Illinois. Now, I'm familiar with Joliet because I watched the Blues Brothers. And I know what's there. We have a prison and apparently a church. And so there we go. So we go to Joliet, and we arrive on a Friday, and I kid you not, Friday night the pastor has us over to his house for dinner. And the point is, as a new budding pastor, you're supposed to learn about the ins and outs of church development. Like, somebody has to order the paper towels, and here's what this looks like, and, this is what a sermon should be. And that's what that's all about. Well, on this Friday night dinner, he says to my husband, "I'd like to help you, but my wife was just diagnosed with breast cancer, so you're on your own. We're handing you the church. We're leaving it to you for your entire vicarage. We'll come back because then her treatment should be done." Now, my husband is like completely blank because he's never done anything before. He's got no experience. He's just, translated ancient texts, which really doesn't help as much as you think. But then there's me. And so I say, "All right, I know exactly why we're here." And he's like, "You do?" Yeah, actually, since I walked my mom through her cancer journey, I knew what this woman would need. And so, because sometimes I think it's all about me, I give her a bag. I get her a tote bag, because anytime you have any serious illness, they give you a tote bag. And inside, I put things that you would need going through chemotherapy. Mittens and soft socks, because your extremities get really cold. unscented lotion and chapsticks because you get really dry, and funny reading materials. I kid you not, someone gave my mom a book about planning your will when she was diagnosed with cancer. I'm like, well, that's ridiculous. So I made sure she had Jim Gaffigan stuff, books in there, and magazines, things like that. And I gave it to this woman, and she opened it up and she said, I told you I have cancer and you gave me socks, because she didn't know. She had no idea. And she came back to me a month later and she said, everything. I've used everything in that bag. I didn't know I needed it. It was like you opened the junk drawer and dumped it in there, and I didn't know. And I said, well, isn't that the perfect metaphor for life? God dumps things in a junk drawer, and we're supposed to say, what are we supposed to do with that? Now, oftentimes, not oftentimes, every day, I talk to God in the shower. I don't care what you think about that. I don't care if you think it's blasphemous. That's what I do. Because I have 4 children now, and no time, and a husband, and a dog. It's my only solace, is the shower. And so this is how I talk to him, and we start our mornings. I'm like, good morning, God. How are you? I have some ideas about things. And he's like, because I always see him, picture him with tea in his hand, very calm. Good morning, Heidi. That's how we start. I've got so many things I want to fix. And he's like, I know you do. I'll listen to you. He listens. He's not here to obey me. He will listen to me in my shower with my shampoo, but it doesn't mean he's going to do what I say. And I struggle with that all the time. And so we're there, and I'm talking to him like, okay, is this woman, is she the reason we're here? Everything's gonna be fine, right? Like, this is the only hiccup in my life that's gonna happen, right? Just this little woman with cancer, and we're gonna move out of Joliet back? Okay, in my head, that's what's gonna happen. Well, within a week of being there, we were told that the vicarage house was really big and had plenty of room for all of us. It had 2 bedrooms, and thankfully it had a basement, so we shoved everything in the basement that we could, that we thought of, because we knew that there was no room up top. Now, in the first week, there were 2 floods in the basement, and I don't mean, oh, what is that, dampness? I mean, there were things floating all over. It was so bad, including all of my mom's sewing patterns. And so here I'm in the shower whining, God, all of my mom's sewing patterns are floating away. This is what God said. Heidi, tell me about those patterns. There were about 1 million of them, weren't there? Yes. And he says, were you really going to use them, or are you just keeping them for sentimental value? I said, look, if I want logic, I'll talk to my husband. I need a little reassurance here. Come on, God. And so we go through that, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what else could possibly go wrong? Never say those words. Never. Don't ask. Don't even put it out there, because he'll say, oh, I got one. No, I don't need one. I'm good. So at that time, I have a little girl who's 7, a little girl who's 3, and a little girl who's 2, and the 2-year-old's in the crib. Don't judge. That's not too old, is it? Anyway, so we moved a lot, so the crib is broken. And the crib's sides are supposed to go down, so you can do things like change the sheets. Well, this one, we've moved so much now that it's broken, so it doesn't go down. Thankfully, I'm like 9 feet tall. So I'm changing the crib sheet one day, and I stood up, and I thought I snagged a button, but I was wearing a T-shirt, a plain T-shirt. So whatever I snagged on my chest was so hard and firm that it snagged. That's how hard it was. And I thought, oh my gosh, what's going on? Well, we had just learned days before that I was pregnant with my 4th child. So Joliet wasn't that bad, but nonetheless. So there we are. So I feel this little lump, this really hard lump on my breast. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening? What is that? I drive from Joliet up to Chicago to see my OBGYN from all the other kids so that I can trust. And she's like, wow, that's, it looks little, feels little, but with your family history, we'll just do a needle biopsy and we'll see. And a needle biopsy, for those of you who don't know, they literally stick some needles in to where they suspect the mass might be and extract things, and they study it. Well, that came back fine. I remember pulling in the driveway, and my husband ran out to greet me. He's like, it's fine, they called. There's no cancer. And he hugged me. And as he was hugging me in that moment, there's something in the back of my head, and sometimes, right or wrong. Things are wrong or right. This was not right. I knew something was amiss. And I did not know what to do. So I went back to the OBGYN. I had to go a week later anyway for a baby visit. And she said, this sounds a little crazy, but this thing feels actually bigger than it was just a week ago. So we're going to do something called a lumpectomy, which is they remove this mass. And so I go in for my lumpectomy, husband, kids, all in the waiting room, and they wheel me in. And since I'm pregnant, they can't fully anesthetize me. I cannot be unconscious. They just give me local anesthesia. So I'm being wheeled in, and I'll give you a little visual for those of you who've never had surgery. Wheeled in with they tape your arms down, and they put a little blue screen up so you can't peek over and see what's going on. So I get wheeled in. And the surgeon, immediately upon making the incision, says, no kidding, "Oh my God." That's what he says. I'm like, well, now I want to peek over the little screen. What's going on over there? Is there like a hand coming out? I need to know. So I'm frozen, in fear. And the nurse, God bless nurses, the nurse had the presence of mind to calm down and say, or like calm me down and say, we can see the little thing that we had done the needle biopsy on. We can see that, and it really doesn't look suspicious to us. What we couldn't see on any of your scans is that you have something called nested tumors. So under that little one is a bunch of them, and they all have fingers. And I don't know what that means, but it doesn't sound good from my angle. And so at one point in the surgery, I feel like I'm on fire, and I scream as loud as I can. And the doctor said, "Ooh, can you feel that?" And I said, "Yes." And the nurse said, once again, the calm voice of reason, said, "When we had anesthetized you, we didn't realize how large the mass was. And so we were hoping that the anesthesia reached as far as the mass is, but it didn't. And so you feel us cauterizing you. We're going to stop and give you more anesthesia." So that's what was going on. And when they wheeled me out, I was praying ferociously. I was terrified. And my little daughter runs over to me. She says, Mommy, we heard a lady screaming in there." And I said, "We should pray for whoever that was." Because you never want the kids to know. And much like the rest of my life, and probably the rest of you, when things are really scary, as this was, because I learned immediately that this was cancer, I turned to my Bible. And first, let me tell you that I went to see an oncologist in Chicago. And again, this is my home. This was my safety net. Chicago was all I knew and loved. And I thought this was the best place to go. And the oncologist that was recommended to me gave me a bunch of pamphlets, because that's what they always give you. This is the type of chemotherapy you'll get. Here are the side effects. Here's what you do to prevent the side effects, on and on. And before the last pamphlet was turned over, the doctor said, we've talked about this. We've never really had a case like yours, so we discussed it. We feel that this is the best. And she turned it over, and it said, "Terminating your pregnancy." And I remember thinking, well, if we're all about choice, what about my choice? And she said, she actually said, "I don't understand what the big deal is. It's just a tissue." And I said, because I don't know where this sass comes from, but it came right out, and I said, "I have 3 tissues at home, and I really like them." I would like to keep this one. And so, because I remember my mom saying, "Pick it up anywhere and open it." And I thought, I need a little fluff right now. I need you to be fluffy. So I pick it up and I open it to what was the middle. And it was Psalms 22, which is not fluffy. Just a little heads up on that chapter. But I was so afraid. I was so afraid of what was going to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what to do with this baby. I'm getting the most respected people I know telling me that if I want to survive, that I have to kill my baby. They said my cancer was so aggressive that they would not treat me. And if I were still alive when the baby was born, then they might start to treat me. That's what they actually told me. And I thought, what is going on? And so the first part of this small little chapter I want to share with you, Psalms 22, verses 9 through 10. This is what I read first. "But you are he who took me out of the womb. You made me trust while on my mother's breast. I will cast upon you from birth, from my mother's womb. You have been my God." Now, who am I to sway from that? So I knew crystal clear. This is what I'm supposed to do. No question. If you are the doctor and you are the wisest person I know, then I need to go find another wise person because you are not her. So my friends know what's happening. They understand that there's a panic situation. I'm being told I won't live. The baby's not going to live. What are we going to do? So my friend calls someone that she knows, ironically, back in Indianapolis, and lets him know. And this doctor says, bring her in right away. This is an urgent situation. If she's at the stage that she is, we need to bring her in. Now, none of this conversation happens with me. It only happens with my friend and the doctor. No HIPAA laws at this time, just so you know. So there's this big conversation. So she gives me the number and says, just call him and see if he can get you in. So I call, and let's say it's a Thursday. This doctor says, you know what, why don't you come in tomorrow, and I'll see you. And I said to this doctor on the phone, what kind of a quack are you? I can't see my dentist for 6 months, but you're going to pencil me right in? Have you ever had a patient before? There's the sass coming right up like that. God's going like this, come on. So the man that I called, the president of the American Society of Clinical Oncologists, George Sledge, says, yeah, I can get you in. So I drive down to see him. And he also says, please bring your tumor with you. And I said, well, do I need like a hazmat suit, or how does that work? He said, no, they're going to give it to you in a little slide. So I put the slide in a box, and I put that in a bigger box, and I put it in the seat next to me, and I drove from Chicago to Indianapolis, and I yelled at that thing the whole way, I hate you, driving all the way down. And when I get down to Indianapolis, I meet George Sledge, and he is not your typical TV doctor. You know, he's not wearing a $3,000 suit, and his hair's not slick. He was wearing a giant tie with a picture of a cancer cell on it. It was crooked. He had soup that day for lunch. I knew because it was right here on his shirt. He was wearing a wide wale corduroy jacket with the leather, not because he's a hipster, because he still had it from 1960. So I'm like, great. I'm trusting my life and the life of my unborn child to you. And Indianapolis, University of Indiana, is a learning hospital, and that means children going to school are interns. And he says, would you mind? And they look like they're 12, and they're all shaky, and they have little, no offense to 12-year-olds, shaky clipboards. And he says, would you mind if I bring in the interns? I'm like, I'm completely naked. Bring them all in. Do they need, like, parental guidance or something? So in come the 12-year-olds, and I hand them my tumor, and so George goes in the corner and looks at them, looks at the slide, talks to them, and then he turns around, and he said, I'm going to save that little baby, and while I'm at it, I'm going to save you too. And I stood up, and that paper gown went all over, and I hugged that man, and I did not care, because he had given me the one thing that no one else had, a little grain of hope, just a little bit, and that's all I needed to cling to. I didn't need anything else. I knew that God would put the right person in front of me. I knew I just needed to find him somehow. I didn't suspect he'd be in Indiana, but whatever. He's on his own. So I go through with George. We talk about everything. Like, here's what's going to happen. He said, since you've lost your mom, we've made great advances. We can keep white blood cell counts where they need to be. We can help with nausea. There are really miraculous things we can do. You can't have any because you're pregnant, but we've really done great things. Great. He said, so instead of getting chemotherapy for 4 hours or 5 hours like most people, you'll be there for 9 hours or more, because we have to give it to you very slowly. We have to make sure that the medicines we give you, we know they won't cross the placental barrier, but we don't want to push anything. We have to be slow. And so we did. We plow through everything, and we begin. And there were times that I thought for sure that I was utterly, utterly alone. Not just because I couldn't find anyone in my situation, not just because I was the only one by decades in my age group in the cancer center, but because I would pray, like you said, and not hear anything. And I would cry out, where are you? You're always there. I always hear your voice. Why can I not? And I stuck back to my same one. Believe it or not, this entire thing is one chapter, one part of Psalms. So verse 1b through 2, it said, why are you so far from helping me? and the words of my groaning. Oh my God, I cry in the daytime, but you do not hear, and at the night season, and I am not silent. I was not silent. I laid on my bathroom floor, and I cried. I was so afraid for this baby. I was so afraid for all of my babies. My eldest daughter was a little peanut going to school, but still vulnerable. We had to go to chemotherapy every Friday. Now, how can you take a child out of school for a full year of Fridays and have her make it? We couldn't. I didn't know what to do. So I threw it up there, and God spoke and said, I will handle that. And her little school that she was going to decided that all the moms got together, and they decided that they were going to help my sweet little Alex by giving her surprise slumber parties every Friday so that she would always have her homework done and always have better meals than I would make, frankly, take care of her. And so as you can picture your own children's grades, about halfway through they ran out of little girls, right? So then they get to the little boys. Well, they're really young, so it doesn't matter. So even the little boys are like, yeah, come on over, you can play with my little sister, whatever. Except one little boy. He was the last one. His name was Michael. Michael didn't like people very much at all. And so the idea of him inviting another human to his house was mortifying. But Michael had a job to do, and his mom was going to see that he did it. So she put her hands on his little backside, and she pushed him, and she said, Michael, go ask that little girl. So Michael goes over, and he says, Alex, would you like to come to my house for a slumber party? And Alex, wildly unaware of everything, and secretly madly in love with Michael, says, why, Michael, I'd love to. Mommy, he loves me. We're getting married. That's Michael. We still don't know what happened to Michael, but nonetheless, they took care, and the cycle started again. So Alex never missed a day of school, never missed a meal, was on the honor roll. Like, they did better parenting than I did, even when I didn't have cancer. Amazing things happened without my involvement, only through God. Only through God. And I have to tell you, there are times in my life where people have said, this is an old book, it's really ancient, and it doesn't relate. If I can find an entire life in one little chapter, how can this not be a living document? And let me show you this. So, and there are two other little things I want to tell you. So this is Psalms 22:17. This is exactly, when you go through chemotherapy, you lose a lot of weight, even if you're pregnant, and it's hard. And the general public cannot look away. Let me read to you how this relates. I can count all of my bones. They look and they stare at me. This is me. He wrote this for me. This entire chapter, I knew exactly what was going to happen. What can I do? What could I do? At one point, I felt utterly unfeminine. I was finally gaining my pregnancy weight, but now I had no hair. And for those of you that see those movies in Hollywood where they lose their hair, and you're like, wow, they're still beautiful. Well, one, that's like Halle Berry. She's always going to be beautiful, okay? Second, they leave their eyebrows on and their eyelashes, and that really makes a big difference. You can be bald and still have all that stuff, and you still can pull it off, or a lot of makeup. It just didn't work for me. I just didn't know how to make that. I'm not a big makeup person, so I didn't know. Thankfully, I have a gentleman friend who's in musical theater. And this was before the day of the cell phone. So for you young people, we had something called a speaker phone. And so my friend says, girl, the problem is you just don't feel feminine. You need to go get yourself some fake eyelashes, and I'm going to walk you through how to put those on. I'm like, okay. So you can write this down if you need to. It's a little tip from me to you. When you go shopping for your first pair of fake eyelashes, don't go the day after Halloween to the Walgreens. Because right there, when you walk in, there's a big box. I'm like, wow, good one, God. Right here, it's all waiting for me. Glamour length, whatever that is. I'm sure I need that. So I put him on the speakerphone, and he's walking me through it. Put 3 dots of glue on there, and you stick those things on your eyes. Okay, and I'm speakerphone in the bathroom, and he says, now you stand up, girl, and you tell me what you see. So I said, I think I look like a pregnant drag queen. And he said, fabulous. I'm like, no, I don't think that's what I'm supposed to go for. And I'm going through this, and some of it's hysterical, and some of it's awful. But through it all, every time I go sit down somewhere and I have my little book with me, this very little book with me, people are like, oh, that's not going to help you. It's not going to do anything. You stand right back, because this is helping me. And it doesn't relate, I was told. This cannot be relatable to me as a cancer patient. Now, if you don't know what chemotherapy feels like, if you have no idea, I'm going to read this to you, and you're going to know what it feels like. And it's from a 2,000-year-old book, let me tell you. Psalm 22, 14 through 15. I am poured out like water. All of my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It has melted within me. My strength is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue clings to my jaws. You have brought me to the dust of death. That is chemotherapy right there. Right there. That's a perfect description. Every time I read it, it spoke to me. Every single time I read it, it spoke to me. And we plowed through, that little baby and I. We went through all of those months of chemotherapy on a Friday, and then on a Monday, a scan, just to make sure that little heart was still beating. We just kept plowing through. And then, because they knew that they did not get something called clean margins on the surgery, they decided that they would take the baby early through C-section. And he was born strong and healthy and handsome and wise and perfect. And my husband named him Noah because he made it through the flood. Thank you. And he remains a remarkable boy. And every night when I kiss him at bedtime and all of his sisters, I say, thank you, God, for one more day. That's all I ask every day. But when he was born, I had just begged, because I was told I would not be there to see him. And when he was born, I just remember saying, I just want to look at his face. I just want to look at his face. And what they don't tell you is, when you're pregnant and you have chemotherapy, your immune system is compromised. And even if they do tell you, you don't know what that means. It means you can't be with that baby you just had for a long time. He goes down to the NICU, and you stay over here because you both have no immune system, so you're far away from each other. And it's hard. And so when he was being walked out of the room, I was quietly speaking what I thought was under my breath, and the surgeon was finishing up. And she said to my husband, what is she saying? Is she all right? And he said, yeah, she's saying kindergarten because she's renegotiating right now with the Lord. So, and when he got out of kindergarten, I said, grad school. I just want a little more. I don't want to be selfish, but I want a little bit more. And George Sledge, my brilliant, wonderful, fantastic doctor, asked me between my chemotherapy, because you can't do everything cancer-wise when you're pregnant, so I had to wait until the baby was born before I had radiation. So he came to me right after chemo, right when we were, packing up to move back to Fort Wayne so we could finish up the seminary. Finish up the seminary, yay! So he says, listen, we're going to have a fundraiser to raise some money to get new things for the cancer center, and I'd really like you to speak. And I said, oh, I work with computers. I don't talk to people. Like, I don't think you understand. Plus, I'm really huge. I just had a baby. I don't have any hair. I look like my brother when I look in the mirror. Like, I am not, no offense, Billy, wherever you are. I shouldn't be your representative. And he said, you're exactly who the representative should be. And I said, but I don't, I probably can't raise any money. I don't even know what I'm talking about. And he said, what makes you think that this is your story? And I said, excuse me? And he said, you talk about God all the time. Maybe he's the one that needs you to. What if there's one person in that audience who needs to hear, she may not have cancer, she may not be pregnant, but she may be desperate to hear something good. What if they need to know about Noah and not you? What if he's the one? I'm like, oh, you're going to throw God at me. Okay. And so I spoke, and his request was, when you get to the part about Noah, don't tell him how he is. I want to bring him in like the Lion King. I thought, well, that sounds completely hokey, but whatever. And so I speak. The first speaking engagement I had was probably 500 women. All of them were drunk because it was at a fundraiser, and they all had a lot of wine. And I'm like, this is not going to go well. So I do my thing, and then at the end, sure enough, George brings him in like the Lion King, and I watched from the back, from this little tiny baby with big eyes, because he was horrified, all these crying, screaming women trying to touch him, walking to the front. It was like a wave coming forward. You could collectively hear them like not breathing. And when I got to the front, he said, "You shared your hope." And I held him, and I realized upon seeing, what if there was that one person? What if that was it? And this is not, I don't know if it's my calling. I feel very passionate about it because I always think that there's that one person. And the first time that I spoke, it was for George, and the next time I was asked to speak, it was at a school, and they said, "Are you going to talk about Jesus? Because you did that at the last one." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah." Like, you don't get me without the other. I mean, I can, but I'll slip and say Jesus all the time, so I'm not going to, like, stop and, like, lie to you. And so once again, I want to go back right to the same one and tell you what else I saw. What else I found in this little thing right after that conversation with George. "You have answered me. I will declare your name to my brethren. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you." This chapter was for me, but it really wasn't. It was written about Jesus, right? But nonetheless, it was fantastic. And I thought, what if, and you go through in life, you think you're doing what you're supposed to do, and you're not really sure. And I got to the point where I didn't know if I was making an impact, because sometimes I would meet that one, sometimes I wouldn't. And I had not yet studied deeply enough to realize that some people sow and some people harvest. And when I talked to him intently, he said, "You are not a harvester. You don't need to know." And so, of course, since it's me, I said, "Oh, but I want to know. I need to know. I need to understand what's going on." And one time I gave a speech, and it was to a bunch of surgeons, and they were all men. And when I was done, it was like golf clapping. They're like, "Okay, great." And I was like, "Oh." And so I went home and told my husband, "Well, that's a sign from God. I'm done speaking." And he's like, "You are not done speaking." I said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "Because they didn't give you a standing ovation, that's why you're not?" I'm like, "Well, yeah." That's a sign. And he said, "No, that's not your sign." And so I pouted about it, and I referred to it, the surgeon's event. That was my thing. 3 months later, I get a call from a woman who said, "My daughter's pregnant. They've told her to terminate because she's got breast cancer. Can you help?" I'm like, "Absolutely. That's what I do. Can you tell me where you met me?" And she said, "Yep, you were speaking at a surgeon's conference." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't mean to cut you off." But that was all men, and I've been complaining to God about this for a long time. "So you weren't at that event?" And she said, "Oh, yes, I was. I was the waitress. And when you started speaking, God himself told me to hide behind that pillar and listen to what you had to say. And then God said, you will not ask me again about harvesting and sowing. That is your job. You sow. And so I try to sow. And it's difficult because I think that there are things that I need to do. 5 years after my diagnosis, I was re-diagnosed. And I will have cancer with me forever. And I take a low-dose daily chemo every day. And I thought, I've been speaking? What is going on? Like, am I not supposed to be doing this anymore? Why is this retaining with me? And it's not. I found a peace knowing that it's part of me, but it's also part of him. He's going to use it for something else, for something bigger, bigger than me, bigger than my daughters, bigger than my son, bigger than all of us. There is a mission in this. And it's all tied. My husband has graduated. He had started a church, and then he was called to start a church in Toronto, Canada, way up there. And then I thought, well, this is ridiculous. And it was a quagmire of bad. First of all, I left Alex, my wonderful, precious little girl who was in love with Michael. She had started college, and we had to leave her in the United States while we went to Canada. The pastor that my husband was working with was committing atrocities with young women in his church. It was bad. It was a bad situation. However, a woman had come to me with breast cancer. A woman who I would have never met of my own design, never. And she said, I'm a very busy woman, I'm vice president of a company, but if you could just tell me what kind of medicine I should take or what will happen to me when I take this medicine, I'd appreciate it. So every time I met with her, I told her what she needed to know, and then I would say, and I'll pray for you. And she said, do you really mean that when you say that? And I said, yes. every time. And this went on and on and on for months. And then one day, the situation with my husband's church was so bad, I missed my little sweetie in going to school in the United States. And it was one of those moments where, and I know you've had them, you cannot take it anymore, and you get on your knees, right? And I'm gonna give you a little visual so you understand. I'm on my knees in the kitchen of this awful little house in Canada. And I'm like, God, I am down here, and I cannot take it anymore. I don't know what to do. I thought cancer was the worst thing, but I'm not really sure. And now, while I'm looking under here, I realize I have not vacuumed under the refrigerator. And while I'm doing this, I'm praying for a sign, and my phone starts ringing. And I mute it. I'm like, oh, I need to whine some more because I need a sign. I need a sign. And I stand up, and it's that woman. It's that woman who I've been working with. And I call her back, and she says, can you please come over here? Now, this is a woman who is an avowed atheist, who had been mistreated by her husband. Terrible. And so she said, can you please come to my house? I'm like, I can't. I'm waiting for a sign from God. All right. So I go over, and I'm in her kitchen, like getting her a cup of tea. She's curled up in a little chair, this woman who's going through chemotherapy, abandoned by her husband, wrapped up in a blanket, crying her eyes out. I'm making her some tea. And I said, I'm really struggling because I pray for your husband, and though I don't want to because he's a real jerk, and I'm praying for him anyway. And she said, oh, you have to teach me how to do that. And I said, teach you how to pray for bad people? And she said, no, just pray. And I was like, oh. So I went over and I said, Jesus, this is Kelly. I told you all about her, and here she is. And I just effused everything, all the love that I had been holding up and sharing just with me and Jesus, just waiting for the Holy Spirit to come. And then I was able to share it with her. And at the end, we were both crying, and I thought, I'm in the middle of this depth, this darkness, this chasm that I can't get out of. And you showed me that it's not about me. There are other people, ladies, that we are supposed to help. And so if you find yourself in a position that you think is intolerable, stand back and look at who's looking at you. Are they little people? Are they big people? Are they broken people? Answer, yes. Everybody's broken, and everybody needs us. We have to help each other. And if you don't know where to go, and you don't know what to do, just pick it up, and drop it open anywhere. Because no matter how old this book is, there's something in there that will describe what you're going through at this moment. And I hope that none of you ever need my services in the world of cancer, but if you ever do, let me know. I'm available on all sorts of social media. But I'd like to show you, before I leave, I'd like to show you some photos of some of the heroes in my life, if I can. If my people up in the evening. So this is Dr. George Sledge. He really is a genius. And Noah, my little tiny hero. And then the next picture will be my family, including Pastor Stuart Floyd. Thank you very much for letting me share my story with you. It has been an honor and a privilege to let you know a little bit about my life. I'd like to pray, if I may. Is that all right? Thank you. Heavenly Father, you have brought these people here on this beautiful evening to this wonderful place, and I know that there is a reason. I know that there is a purpose for every single person that is sitting in a seat here, Father. And someone needs to hear this message. Someone needs to know that you are speaking to them specifically, not in general terms, not in round tones, but specifically like a laser to their soul. There's something that you need to tell them, and if they need to hear it from others, let them, Lord, but encourage people to find you in your word. Let it flow over them so that they can be immersed in who you are. Let your Spirit find them deep in a place that they've been hiding. And remind us all, Lord, every day, every time we get in the shower, that we can talk to you freely, openly, because you are all we need. You've given us the biggest gift we can imagine through the people that we have in our lives, through everything we experience, and even through the hardships that you give us, Lord. Because there are people watching us, we who profess to be Christians, and they're hoping to see you just a little bit, just a glimmer of who you are. Remind us to be the person you want us to be, Lord. And thank you for forgiving us when we're not. Help us every day, Lord, to thank you for just one more day. In your sweet name, amen.
Amen.